听见资本本期视频为您带来的是摩根大通在3月14日关于欧洲天然气市场的话题。欧洲天然气市场现在真是站在风口浪尖上，地缘政治的紧张局势和市场变化双重夹击，让人不得不关注俄罗斯和乌克兰可能在2025年达成停火。这消息一出，欧洲的能源格局估计得翻个天，加上全球液化天然气供应的增长，市场走势变得更加扑朔迷离。今天我们就来聊聊摩根大通最新的分析，看看这些变化会怎么搅动天然气价格和需求。先说停火这事儿，谈判好像有了点眉目。摩根大通的专家欧泰预测，2025年下半年开始，俄罗斯通过管道往欧洲输送的天然气会慢慢回升，每年大概15亿立方米。怎么送过来呢？可能是通过乌克兰这条老路子，或者北溪管道，甚至还有俄罗斯自己的液化天然气项目。不过欧洲到底愿意接多少俄罗斯气，这是个关键。专家觉得20%算是个合理的线，供应一多，价格自然得动起来。2025年欧洲天然气库存偏低，市场还是紧巴巴的。荷兰天然气价格估计得稳在每兆瓦时40到45欧元。到了2026年就不一样了，随着俄罗斯管道气和美国、卡塔尔这些地方的液化天然气涌进来，价格可能跌到每兆瓦时25到26欧元，比现在的远期价格低不少。这可是个大信号，市场对未来的供需平衡似乎有点乐观。但地缘政治和天气这些不确定因素也不能小瞧，价格便宜了，用气的需求肯定得涨。工业和发电这块最敏感，特别是化工行业和电力部门。摩根大通算了算，2026年工业需求能多出3亿立方米，发电再加1.5亿立方米。这波需求回暖会给市场注入点活力，多少抵消点供应过剩的压力。总的来说，欧洲天然气市场现在是机遇和挑战并存。停火谈判的进展，全球液化天然气的增量，还有需求的反弹，都在重新画这张能源地图。摩根大通的分析给了我们一个挺清楚的窗口，看看未来可能会怎么走。市场风云变幻，接下来的动态绝对值得盯着瞧。接下来是英文会议的全部内容，如果您需要英文原稿和我的投研助理人工校对的中文文本，您可以在频道的 Patreon 上获取。
Hello, and welcome to another episode of At Any Rate. I'm your host, Natasha Kanova, and I head JP Morgan Global Commodities Research. Today, we would like to discuss the European natural gas markets, and I'm joined by Otar Deboise from our European Natural and Global LNG team. Otar, welcome. So our view on the commodities research side has been that ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine will take place in 2025. This is a view that we have across all the commodities under our coverage, but among the commodities under our coverage, natural gas market is probably the one where this may have the biggest impact. So, Otar, as the ceasefire negotiations progress, so there's a lot of headline news coming through. Yesterday was a heavy day in terms of headlines. Where do you see the impact on natural gas flows in Europe?
Hi, Natasha, and thank you for having me, and thank you for our listeners. So we now incorporate a tepid return of Russian pipeline gas flows back to Europe in the amount of 15 BCM a year, starting from the second half of 2025 and gradually increasing throughout the remainder of 2025, based on the scenario analysis that we presented last month.
Yes, so Otar, talking about the avenue, so it could be a pipeline gas, yes, it could be an LNG. So when you analyze, so first of all, what is the avenue of the Russian gas to return to the global markets, and what are the potential volumes?
Yes, certainly there are multiple options for these flows to materialize. For now, we have modeled the return of Russian pipeline gas through decreasing exports from Northwest Europe to Central and Eastern Europe, implying that these flows will come through Ukraine corridor. We have long held the view that Ukraine corridor would be the likeliest path if Russian natural gas flows to Europe were to increase. However, of course, there are other options like the Nord Stream, as it was recently in the news, various options through Nord Stream 1 or 2, and obviously Russian LNG, where revocation of US sanctions can lead to an upside in volumes of about something between 7.5 to 12.5 BCM in 2026, coming from Arctic LNG 2 and also smaller LNG plants in Baltic Sea that were sanctioned earlier this year. In terms of pipeline volumes, previously we presented two scenarios of 15 BCM and 40 BCM per year. These numbers are based on actual flows via Ukraine and the contracted amounts via Ukraine corridor through now expired transit deal. Today, we officially lead into scenario 1 of 15 BCM a year, but also flag that there is an upside to at least 40 BCM a year. Additional 40 with the existing flows through Turkstream, excluding the Russian LNG, would correspond to about 19% of total European imports. And we think this share of Russian imports in total European supply portfolio will dictate the actual volumes rather than transportation or upstream capacities on the Russian side. In other words, it's about how much Russian gas Europe will accept rather than how much Russia can send. And we think 20% is the right level.
Thank you, Tar. Yes, this 20%, corresponds with what we're observing, for example, in the case of oil in China. Yes, so China has very similar policies that they would prefer not one single country or not one single source to have more than 20% import in their import basket. So what do the increased volumes mean for prices? So 15 BCM, it's not a big number, but still it would have implications for prices. If you could walk us through, please.
Yes, it's not a big number, but certainly it's not a small number either. And it has price impact slightly different in 2025 and 2026. So for the remainder of 2025, and especially through the upcoming injection season, we still see quite tight European natural gas market, given the depleted storage levels and the need to refill ahead of next winter. So right now, as of latest data we have of 12 March, Northwest Europe is about 27% full. Whole European Union is about 36% level. And we expect Northwest Europe to exit winter about 25% full. This compares to 53, 54% that we saw last 2 winters. And we still forecast about 220 MCM a day of LNG send-outs throughout March and October, which is about 50% higher year over year. And with this amount of LNG and with the Russian gas entering continent from Q3, this still gets us to only 86% full by end of October, still below the 90% target. Mm-hmm. And we think that this justifies TTF prices to remain near current level of something between 40 and 45 euros per megawatt hour into Q3, Q2 to outcompete other LNG competitors. 2026 is slightly different story. Obviously, a lot will depend on the next winter weather, but weather adjusted, we see a bearish outlook for 2026. With 15 BCM a year of Russian pipeline gas coming to continent, and in addition to all other supply coming through new LNG export capacities in the US, Canada, Mexico, and Qatar, we now see 2026 price close to 25, 26 euro per megawatt hour compared to our previous forecast of 31 euros and the current forward curve of about 34 euros per megawatt hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the bearish implications are mostly not for 2025, but for 2026 under your scenario 1. Could you please remind us of a scenario 2, which you guys wrote about that a couple of weeks ago? It's if there's a 40 BCM of additional supply coming from Europe. So what would be the implications for 2026 price?
Yes, with 40 BCM scenario 2, we see a TTF price somewhere between 20 to 22 euros 2026 average.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tar. Okay, so we're talking about lower prices, especially for 2026. So the second order implication of lower prices is also demand. Yes. So considering scenario 1 and additional 15 BCM of supply, what lower prices mean for demand?
Yes, lower prices we think will have an impact on industrial and power demand in near term, and while the residential and commercial demand will likely continue to be influenced mainly by weather, but also by increased electrification trends in Europe. We have written in the past about the industrial demand destruction and how much of it was permanent versus temporary, in which sectors. So I would not go into these details for now, but we think that there is a room for demand to recover that has been temporarily impacted by higher prices and higher price volatilities. And we incorporating this, we increased the industrial demand by about 3 BCM in 2026, out of which about 1 BCM can be attributed to just chemical sectors on the back of normalized capacity utilization rates from current level of 75% to longer term average of near 80%. This industrial demand recovery can potentially be further supported by Europe's defense and infrastructure spending plans. But for now, we see limited impact, direct impact on this, on natural gas demand. Lastly, in the power sector, we see about 10 MCM a day flexibility in price-sensitive coal to gas switching, which we think will materialize next summer, given the lower price outlook. And we are currently projecting this translates into about 1.5 BCM of upside in power generation demand. So between industrial and power, we have close to 4.5 BCM increase in 2026 on the back of lower prices.
Thank you, Attar. Okay, so to sum it up, we're now incorporating about 15 BCM of additional Russian gas increase in 2026. As a result, we're revising our 2026 prices lower by about €5 per megawatt hour. So this is about almost $10 lower where the forward curve sits today for the TTF market. So thank you, Attar, for joining me today. Thank you all to listening to the Commodities Edition at JP Morgan's At Any Rate podcast. We look forward to continue the conversation next week. This communication is provided for information purposes only. Please refer to JP Morgan research reports related to its content for more information, including important disclosures. 2025, JP Morgan Chase & Company, all rights reserved. This episode was recorded on March 14th, 2025.